Perhaps you've looked in the mirror and have seen that your tongue doesn't always look the same every day, that the coating changes, the color of the tongue body changes, the color of the coating changes, the cracks on your tongue change, the size, and the saliva on your tongue changes too. And that woke up for you a curiosity to know, why is this happening? There must be a reason, right? It's not just random, but following the condition of the body, the tongue can become altered. And so from that, we can see that we can see into the body and learn about the body by looking at the tongue. And that is exciting. It's insightful. It helps you manage your health. It helps you understand other people's health. When my kids say they're sick or not feeling good, I always take a look at their tongue and analyze it, so I know what to do, right? So if we can connect those dots and with some penetrating insight, understand the tongue and the signs that it indicates, we can become more intelligent about our body, and that will be very fruitful and life-giving. So that's our goal today, right? Ayurveda is the study of life. It actually means the same as biology, right? Biology means the study of life. Biology is the Greek, bios and ology, and Ayurveda. Ayur is the life, and Veda is the ology, you might say. So these are, the study of life is a great and noble thing, a happy thing, a beautiful thing. And so today we're going to do that through analyzing the tongue. My name is John Immel, and I'll be the teacher today. I'm the director of the Joyful Belly School of Ayurveda. We are a state licensed college that educates professionals about Ayurveda and how to become a great practitioner of Ayurveda, how to understand the body and give that gift to others so that you can heal the world. And today's talk is sponsored by the Mastering Ayurveda Digestion and Nutrition course, a 1-year course that leads you to mastery in Ayurvedic digestive tract pathology and nutrition. It is a great course, and it starts in about 30 days from now. Today's talk is a little, you might say, snippet from what our students will learn about the tongue and about the digestive tract in general. This course does give you Ayurveda's tools and process to provide high quality clinical digestive coaching to your community. And one of the things I love about this course is that you not only learn about the tongue, but you also learn about the pharmacology of food. And I don't mean pharmacology as in you memorize. I mean, we do some memorization, but experiencing. How, if somebody put a new ingredient on your plate and you ate it for 3 days in a row, could you say accurately its medicinal effects? Well, it's possible, but you may not know how to do that yet, just like you may not know how to read the tongue. But the ancient herbalists used their direct experiences, their 5 senses, to understand the pharmacology and medicinal effects of food and herbs, and it's something you can do too. It's not a hard skill, but it needs to be taught. It needs to be learned. And so just like with the tongue, we need to reclaim some of these important tools for managing daily health and for understanding and navigating our environment around us: food, diet, lifestyle, etc. And Ayurveda does that excellently, so that you have health common sense, that your clients can have health common sense, that your clients can take initiative into healing their body and doing amazing and getting amazing results by understanding themselves. So education at the Joyful Belly School is very clinically focused, very people focused, and we have a focus on great pedagogy so that you get in-depth education. So today, let's get started and talk about the tongue. Why? Why would we learn tongue analysis? Well, the first reason is that the tongue is a visible part of the GI tract. And as a visible part of the GI tract, it is a window into the GI tract. What happens in the GI tract happens on the tongue. And what happens in the tongue, on the tongue also happens to the GI tract. If you put a red hot chili in your mouth and it's hot and pungent, it's going to be hot, pungent, and irritating in your GI too. And even when you eliminate it, it might be burning and hot and irritating. And so we can get a little bit about, know a little bit about the pharmacology of red hot chili peppers just from putting it in our mouth. And the vice versa is also true. If you have an inflamed gut, you are going to see some of that inflammation in the mouth and on the tongue. So usually, you know, in the submarine, you put up the periscope and then you look out to the world, you know, from the inside of the submarine. Well, the tongue is kind of like the opposite. The tongue is, you know, is kind of like peering down the periscope into the submarine, right? That's what it's like. And we'll start with the function of the tongue as a gatekeeper, right? The tongue is where we taste food, and if something tastes awful, you spit it out, and if it tastes great, you want more of it. And so in that sense, it's a gateway. Nothing passes into the GI tract without the tongue's approval. Unless you override it with willpower, your taste buds, your tongue, and your nose work together to say yes or no to food. If all of those organs are functioning correctly, you'll have a good intuition about what to eat. You see this with babies all the time, that you give a baby a banana and the baby will eat the banana. And then the next morning you give the baby a banana again. And even though the baby seemed to love it yesterday, today they hate the banana and they throw it on the floor. And so the tongue is not just a static thing that does the same thing every single time. It tastes change and perception changes in the infant and in adults too. So the tongue says yes when it needs a certain nutrient and no when it doesn't need it anymore. So our tongue can seem a bit whimsical or impulsive in that regard. This time of year, beans are not so attractive this time of year to the tongue, but they're very attractive in March. So, you know, within reason, you might have some, you know, you might be able to eat beans this time of year. You might even enjoy them, but you'll notice next March that if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, that beans are even more attractive than they are now. And that's a funny thing, but has to do with the state of your body right now and the kind of thing that a bean is and its medicinal effect on the body, that the relationship between the tongue and the bean is ever changing, right? So we want to remember that this is not a fixed thing. It's not like we're going to look at your tongue, make an analysis, and then that's forever fixed in stone. It's a living thing. And I think of the tongue as subacute. By subacute, I mean, it doesn't change as rapidly as the pulse, but it doesn't change as slowly as other things, right? So it might take you a while to lose some weight or gain some weight. Maybe over the matter of a month, you can see a weight change. But the tongue is usually changes every few days, right? It's not going to change every hour, usually. A little bit of change after you eat, maybe a little bit of change if you're feverish and it's going up and down throughout the day. But generally, I think of the tongue as, oh, how have things been going over the last few days? Whereas the pulse is, how are you feeling right at this very moment? So the tongue surface may change daily or weekly. The tongue color will reflect more chronic condition, and the tongue body shape is constitutional. So the size and basic shape of your tongue, that is not as changeable. The color is changeable, but reflecting the chronic conditions of the body, and the coating and surface change rapidly. Okay? One of the things I love about the tongue is that you could take a picture of it. You cannot take a picture of the pulse. So I think of the tongue as Ayurveda's greatest diagnostic tool, simply because, again, you can analyze it objectively. It's much less subjective than the pulse is. It's hard to have an objective feeling around the pulse. It is very personal. So, yeah. It's possible to analyze the tongue over the phone or using multimedia. You can email me your tongue and I'll take a look at it and tell you what I see, right? The tongue is awesome because it shows the condition of fluids like rasa and rakta. And rasa and rakta, by the way, are two components of the blood, the red blood cells and the plasma. And the tongue shows whether there's an excess of fluid, a deficiency, or whether or not there are toxins. The tongue can also show you the strength of your metabolism, also known as your Agni, whether you're hot or cold, the general strength of the client, and the quality of your tissue, which is called ojas, right? The quality of bodily tissues. Great. So yeah, I think of the tongue as measuring the progress of a disorder and the recovery of the disorder as well. So that's some basics of the tongue. Why learn the tongue? What are some of the things you can see on the tongue? Now I'm going to talk about the 3 different levels of excellence in assessment, right? There are 3 levels of practitioner. There's the new practitioner who, if that practitioner has knowledge of the whole body, they can interpret any square inch of the body. That's level 1. Now, level 2 is ability to assess the whole body given a square inch. And that's kind of what we're doing here, right? We're going to look at the tongue and assess the whole body, right? So that's level 2, having that knowledge. And level 3 is ability to perceive the nature of the client, not just to understand their body, but to see the client's, to have a reasonable grasp of the client's nature with just a few short words or a few very little bits of information. And then if that practitioner knows the nature of the client, that they can, with a few short words, reach into the heart of the client and inspire them in the right direction. Right, so the first level 1, again, is, hey, can I, if I know the body well, can I come up with a good herb to help this client? Or level 2 is, if you give me any square inch of the client's body, I can know the whole body and give herbs. And level 3 is understanding the client on a deeper level and reaching into the heart of the client and inspire them in to heal themselves. And they may not need herbs at all. Okay. So one thing which I want to say, limitations, right? We talked about what the tongue can do, but I also want to say limitations. I never rely on one diagnostic principle. I'm not just going to rely on the tongue. But what I want to do is look at signs on the tongue, make my guess, my clinical guess, my hypothesis, to use a fancier word. So, well, make my clinical hypothesis, and then I will try to prove my hypothesis by looking at other diagnostic tools. So the tongue is just one diagnostic tool among many. Oh, and looking in the chat here, I see that that one of the people on the call, I can't see your name, but that you just registered for our 2-year Ayurveda Health Counselor Certification Program. Welcome. I hope you like tonight's talk, and I hope you've been enjoying the course. And just know that for those of you who are interested in that course as well, it started 2 weeks ago, and registration closes on Sunday for that. And so you are still welcome if you want to jump in. Allison said, is there any basic change in the tongue related to age? Throughout your life, you do change. Your body does change. Remind me to answer that question at the end of the presentation during Q&A, Allison, and I will get to that. And all of you, if you have a piece of paper and pen or ready, you can write down any of your questions or just type them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. Here's a little bit of tongue anatomy. You can see here these raised bumps in the back. Sometimes people get real curious about that. They look at their tongue and they like see these two huge, bumps in the back, and they're like, "Oh no, I have cancer on my tongue," or something like that. What is that? Is that bad? Is that an infection on my tongue? It's not. It's normal to have two bumps on the back side of your tongue, and you see here there's various different papillae that either have taste buds in them. You see this little crypt. Your saliva goes into this little crypt, and then you have all these taste buds here that sense the food. And other papillae do not have taste buds, but just make the tongue surface rough, so it can be used for cleansing, like the way a cat cleanses its fur. In general, when I approach the tongue, and this is how I approach everything clinically, I'm always going from top to bottom, from outside to inside, generally from the periphery to the center and from the surface to depth. So if I were to analyze a person's tongue, the first thing I would do is I would look at the lips, then I would look at the teeth and throat and top of the mouth, and then working my way down, I would look at the tongue coating and any saliva on the tongue. And then I would look at the tongue surface for any cracks. And then I would look at the tongue body and color, size and shape, and sort of work my way down, again, from the periphery to the center. That's just a general rubric I use to make sure that my assessments are always comprehensive and that I don't forget anything by jumping around in a haphazard way. You can see here, there's a whole lot of things that we look at when we're looking at the tongue. We're not just looking at the tongue, but when I'm looking at my client's tongue, I'm also smelling their breath. I'm looking at the skin around their lips and all these other things that are listed here, the underside, the top side. Engagement is how relaxed is the client's nervous system? Well, you can see that by how tense their tongue is and how frequently it moves. Now, when you're looking at the tongue, different lighting will show different, give you different perspectives. If the lighting in the room is soft light or a harsh white light, you're going to see a difference in the photo, or even just with your eye looking at the tongue. So you always have to discount for that and negate those effects. If you have a strong blue light versus a strong yellow light, the soft lights tend to be more yellow spectrum. The daylight ones tend to be more blue spectrum. You have to sort of discount that when you're looking at the tongue so that your assessment is accurate. If you put a light bulb to the side, you can see the texture of the tongue better. So where you place the light also makes a difference. And if the tongue is wet, it'll reflect light. Now, don't use a tongue scraper before your assessment. If you scrape off the tongue coating, then you're just not going to be able to see it anymore. And then your diagnostic tool is not so good. Try to relax the tongue. And then if you can't, well, that says something about your nervous system, right? It says it's a little tense or overstimulated. If you suck on a sweet, my children love those Pearl de Soleils, they're called, from TJ Maxx. And they did such good schoolwork this week that we allowed them to get a little bit of candy, and that was their choice. And it was delicious, but if you're sucking on those little candies, it'll make an area of your tongue red. If you drink coffee or eat food with turmeric, the color on your tongue can change. So you always want to be mindful of that when you're looking at your tongue, of what you just ate and how that might affect your tongue. Now here's a picture of a normal tongue. I would say, actually, this tongue is just a little paler than I would like. It's hard to find a perfect tongue, but there's no cracks on it. There is some coating in the back, but not a lot. I think that's good. There's a little bit of depression in the root here. That's not so good. So we could find a better tongue. But this is overall a pretty decent looking tongue. You know, I'd like to see, again, a little more color, a little more fullness in the back here, and a little more tongue engagement, not so a little tone in the tongue. Okay? But what should we expect with a normal tongue? That the breath has no smell. You know, a little bit of smell, maybe just a little bit of fleshy smell, but nothing foul. That the lips will be red to pink. These lips are, again, a little anemic. The mouth has no sores or no yellow color in the back of the throat. So I would ask this client to tilt their head back so I can see the back of their throat. And I'd be looking for a yellowish color in the back of the throat. And I'd look to see if there's any sores in the mouth, aphthous ulcers or whatnot. That the teeth are a white pearl-like color. It looks like these teeth are pretty white. You can't see much of them. That the teeth are not gray or yellowish. And those are some basic things I'm going to look for. If I see gray or yellow on the tongue, I'm going to think, oh, vata ama from the colon or bile components in the blood. That's pitta. Now, you may not know what vata is. And so we should take a minute to explain the body types. Vata is a body type associated with deficiency and overstimulation of the nervous system. And Pitta is the fiery body type. And Kapha is the body type associated with excess congestion and sluggishness. So Kapha has poor functioning adrenals, and so they tend to have excess substance. Now, Vata, as I said before, is deficient. They tend to have excess stimulation of the nervous system and a deficiency of substance in the body. Vata tends to be underweight. Kapha tends to be overweight. And Pitta is in between and hot. All right, so, okay. So continuing with our analysis of a normal tongue. We want to see, breath, lips, mouth, teeth. When we want to see saliva, not too thick or stringy. If we see strings of saliva connecting the roof of the mouth to the tongue, we're going to think, the saliva is thick. High viscosity saliva points to either strong dehydration, that's typically not the case, or that the fluids of the body are overly rich from a excessively sweet diet, high in macronutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins. So when you eat a lot of carbs, fats, and proteins, the viscosity of your saliva increases. That's good news for Vata, whose saliva is too thin, but bad news for Kapha, whose saliva tends to be too thick already. Right? So we want the tongue, we don't want to see bubbles on the surface of the tongue or strings from the roof of the tongue to the tongue, which show higher viscosity saliva. We also don't want to see that the tongue is too rough looking. If it's too rough looking, it means that the saliva has a very low viscosity, that the blood is too dried out, not sweet enough. Okay, by dry, I don't mean dehydrated. I mean not sweet, that undernourished in a way. Coating. We want a nickel-sized, thin coating in the back. We don't want to just annihilate the coating. We don't want to have a thick coating either. Right? That little bit of coating in the back means that your body has a little bit of reserve. There's a little extra sweetness in the blood. Right? We want to err on the side of just a little too much sweet. Okay, the ideal tongue surface is no cracks, that it's papillated, not smooth. If your tongue surface has a smooth patch, that can be a sign of a sign of sort of degenerative patterns in the gut, or it can also be a sign of dryness, and or parasites. So we want to take any smooth patches seriously. Okay. The underside of the tongue should also be pink in color and not have distended veins. By underside of the tongue, you touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth and look and see the veins on the bottom should not look wide. Now, what would wide be? Wide would be wider than a popsicle stick. Normal would be half the width of a popsicle stick. All right, again, the normal tongue should be shaped like a flat U, kind of like that, not too much like a V. A V implies that a V usually implies a long tongue from low viscosity fluids and heat, a mix of low viscosity fluids and heat. We don't want to see that the tongue looks very swollen either. Tongue shouldn't be too thin, shouldn't be too swollen. Engagement, it should be relaxed and still, but with good tone. Not like a blob or not limp, not curled up, not very stiff, not trembling. So it might be fun for you to have a mirror handy while we're discussing this so that you can look at what what your tongue is doing as we're talking. And again, the body color should be pink like watermelon or fresh pork with a slight redness at the tip. And that slight redness is a sign that the blood is warming the body. You see the slight redness here at the tip of this tongue? Okay, good. Everybody feel comfortable about what a normal tongue should look like? Yeah, Rachel asks if there's anything significant we can learn from the underside of the tongue. And yes, distension of the veins means blood stagnation. Okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about saliva. Saliva tells you a story also. And the taste of your saliva is the taste of your blood. In a way, you could see what the blood tastes like by tasting your saliva. If you're, and let's talk a little bit more about saliva. Thin saliva will if the saliva is thin, the tongue will peel rough and dry, and the cause, as I said, could be dehydration, deficiency in macronutrients, thin mucosa, that you're not producing enough mucus in to line your digestive tract. So a person who has a very rough, dry-looking coating on their tongue may have enzyme deficiency in the stomach, or a lack of mucus protection in their stomach and upper GI that could predispose them to something like an ulcer, right? The gunas, or the biocharacteristics, you might say, or the metabolic nature of thin saliva is usually due to heat, dryness, and roughness. So the hotter the person, the thinner the saliva, and the drier the person, the thinner the saliva. Herbs that can thicken up saliva include demulcents like marshmallow or licorice root or shatavari. Thick saliva, as I said before, is the opposite. If you see a string of saliva, or the saliva looks frothy or bubbly, or the tongue looks slimy, that's excess richness, too much sweet taste, a condition called dampness. Sometimes that happens when you're extremely dehydrated, but typically it's associated with kapha dosha. And what you want to do in that case is take bitter herbs that scrape fats, a process called lekana in Ayurveda. And you might also drain excess fluids with herbs like punarnava or cumin, coriander, fennel tea. Or you can thin the fluids with turmeric or pungents like ginger, black pepper, and trichatu. All of that can help resolve excessively thick saliva. Let's talk a little bit about coating on the tongue. Coating is the material on the tongue that isn't the saliva, and it's generally stuck to the surface of the tongue unless you scrape it off. So the tongue coating shows you a buildup of excess. And so if you have material in the body that shouldn't be there, it's called a toxin, or ama. The Ayurvedic word for that is ama. And let's see here. Do I have a picture of a coating on the tongue? Here we see a picture of a coating on the tongue. You see how this is not the tongue body? If we scraped this tongue, we would see it would look like the rest of it. Now, this tongue has a healthy pink color. You see how the lips are nice and red too? This is a tongue that has a healthier color than the one up above, which seems just a little bit pale and anemic. We can compare these two tongues. It's always much easier to learn Ayurveda through comparison, by the way. Notice this tongue is thin, much drier, and less wide. Even the jaw is less wide. The lips are not as thick, and this tongue is much more engaged and toned. So the first tongue, any practitioner would immediately recognize as a kapha tongue, and this tongue is a vata tongue. Again, kapha, you see here, the skin's thicker, less engagement, less stimulation in the nervous system, less tone in the tongue, more substance. And the vata tongue, thinner, more stimulation in the nervous system, and drier. Okay? But there's this coating on the tongue. Now, it's unusual for a vata person to have this thick coating. Usually it's associated with kapha. Normally, coating is a sign of kapha. In fact, I might even replace this photo because in a way, this is quite unusual for a vata person to have this kind of coating. But we see that actually this is unusual even for this person. You see these red dots here? That is a sign of acute aggravated condition in the blood. It could be infection, or it could just be, constipation, or but it's some acute condition that's aggravating the doshas. My guess is that it would be something like constipation, only because it would be hard for a vata to have that much toxicity in their body without constipation. All right, so a thick, large white coating is usually kapha in nature, and a thick, large gray coating is usually vata in the colon. Again, this picture is quite unusual, actually, for a tongue. There we see the gray coating. You see how this coating is gray and the other one is white? This gray coating is more typical of toxins from the colon. You ever see gray water, right? Sewage water? It turns gray. And that's basically the color that's on this tongue right now, is that same sewage gray water. Well, that's exactly what constipation is. It's raw sewage sitting in your gut that's toxic and poisonous. And the longer it sits there, the more your body has raw sewage in it, and the tongue turns gray. This is much more characteristic of ama in the colon. Again, this picture up top is a real anatomy. Maybe she's getting sick and ate too much ice cream last night and or a few days ago and got sick as a result or something. Something's a little I need to know more about this client to be able to say something. You see all that brightness in the tip of the tongue, but yet there's a coating? It's a little unusual. Okay. Now this tongue you see has better engagement than the floppy tongue. That was the first tongue we saw, but the coating shows that this person is much less healthy. Even the skin looks a little gray, right? So this is this kind of coating generally smells and even tastes bad and ruins your taste. Tongue coating is associated with sweetness in the body. The sweeter your blood, the more coating you have. And why would it happen? I said before that I would try to offer some penetrating insight into the tongue so that it didn't seem like an esoteric study, but it seemed like common sense. Well, what is that coating made of? That is common sense. Well, it's made of shrub. Do you know what shrub is? If you've ever done home fermenting, making your own homemade wine or homemade beer, which is a great fun thing to do, you're familiar with trub. Trub is the dead candida or yeast that settles at the bottom of the brewery, the brewing container. And that's exactly what you're seeing here on the tongue is trub, dead bacteria. And so now you know why a tongue coating happens when a person's blood is too sweet. When the person's blood is sweet, there is an explosion of bacteria because the bacteria find the sweetness very tasty and they multiply quickly, and that leads to an accumulation on the tongue body. So when we see a tongue coating, we're seeing dead bacteria, and the dead bacteria are there because conditions are favorable due to sweet blood, right? Not esoteric, it is common sense. Now you see that sometimes the tongue coating is yellow, and this indicates bilirubin in the blood. When the liver is stressed or there's inflammation somewhere in the body, there is a buildup of bile constituents in the blood. So typically it's from the liver. That's a typical case, but it can come from other inflammatory processes that cause a breakdown of some of the components of red blood cells that lead to this bilirubin in the blood. Right? You might notice this yellowness is kind of like what a bruise looks like when it gets old. And actually, it looks yellow for the same exact reason as the bruise looks yellow. One of the things you notice about this tongue, too, is it's a little swollen. We see the red dots on this tongue, just like with the tongue up here. We had the same red dots, pointing to an acute condition in the body, what Chinese medicine would call a wind condition, and what Ayurveda would call the aggravated doshas in the spreading stage. Means that the imbalance has entered into the blood and is now systemic. An acute condition. Okay, this is associated with pitta dosha. And the remedies, it usually tastes bitter, And it's a sign of bitterness and sharpness in the body. However, I'll say that bitter is also the remedy, although pungent is not the remedy. We would use cold bitters, not hot bitters. Let's see what I got here on the chat, because I saw some people are asking. Thin the saliva with fresh turmeric or ground? Turmeric is a blood thinner, and however way you take it is good. So fresh turmeric fresh root is awesome, but many people always ask me, what's the best way to take an herb? And my answer to that is always to actually take it, right? Because if you have the best way to take it, but it's hard or more difficult, and you don't take it at all, that is worse. So the best way to take an herb is to actually take the herb. And then if you are very good at compliance, then we can think about the best way. I just think turmeric is fine as a tea or even as a capsule. Some other folks were asking how to send your tongue photo. You can send your tongue photo to me at john@joyfulbelly.com. It's also where you can send any questions you have about the course. In fact, if you have questions about the course, you can text me your question at that number. That is my cell phone number. And I will answer your question about studying Ayurveda digestion and nutrition. All right. Okay, sometimes the coating turns a dark brown or dark gray or black color, and I see that as more rare as severe Vata derangement. When my father got those monoclonal antibodies when he had COVID, they immediately destroyed all the, all the virus in his body, and the die-off was severe. And for like 3 or 4 hours, his tongue turned a black color, and his fever went up to 106.5, and he was a little delirious, and we had to bring it down quickly. It was a kind of emergency situation. We were able to bring it down, and then the tongue coating resolved. So when I see a tongue coating like this, I think of it as a bit rare and more severe derangement, typically of the liver. Now, smoking tobacco can turn the coating slightly brown, and so can drinking coffee, but not this bad. This is like tar in the tongue. To me, that's like something bad is going on with the liver. Now, I'm looking at ChatGPT, and it's translating me as I go, but it's really interesting. It's translating me in Spanish. So I don't actually think it's an accurate translation. I think it's just listening to me as if I'm speaking Spanish. I don't know if you can see that in the closed caption on the screen, and I have no idea what it's spitting out, but I don't think it is an accurate translation of what I'm saying. Anyway, Zoom got my language wrong, it looks like. Okay. So again, here's an example of what I would call a normal tongue coating. Now, I'm not going to say this is a normal tongue. Again, a little too pale, all these, superficial cracks, and just the kind of lack of tone, depression in the root, just like that first tongue we saw, make this tongue not an ideal tongue. But there is a little coating in the back. So we know there's a little excess of substance, and that's good. You can see here by the shiny reflective light that the saliva is a bit higher viscosity on this client. And there's 100 different ways that you can know this, right? Just by the shape of the tongue, and the thickness of the tongue, I already know that this client has thicker viscosity fluids. Now, the astute student will notice a bit of yellowing in the back of the tongue and how the whole tongue looks like it's red mixed with a little bit of yellow. It's slight, but it's definitely there. And you see this very thin white coating on the sides here? That is actually a coating. It's not the thick coating you see in the back that I said was the nickel size coating, but there's a thin coating over the top. And this is another tongue that is a very thick coating. So this client has a lot of ama, and notice, like that other tongue before, that this tongue is also quite red. So I think both of these tongues are a bit similar in their sense that they are both. This tongue does not look as hot as the other tongue. Look at the difference in the redness. You see how this tongue is more fiery? And this tongue is more, it's vivacious, but not as hot, although the lips have a more red. This may be a little bit of lipstick here. I don't want to be fooled. You have to be careful, right? This doesn't look like thick lipstick, but I think there's a little bit of lipstick there. We're going to get to cracks in the tongue in just a little bit. Thanks for asking, Eduardo. Oh, now Zoom is translating me in English again. Go figure. Yeah, so this is, this person's more elderly too, you can see in the quality of the skin. When a person has a thick coating on the tongue, a lot of sweetness in the body, that could be a sign of hypothyroid, could be a sign of hyperglycemia. Okay, now this coating's a little more greasy. It looks like grease, like car grease. I don't know if you ever used car grease. My dad and I used to work on cars when I was a kid. And I enjoyed helping him do that. But here's a little bit of a greasy coating on the tongue. Again, this tongue is a little pale, a little anemic, and a little yellow generally. So this is a greasy tongue is a white and yellow mix that resembles grease. A little creamy. Tongue coating should be a little creamy. Probably we want even a little creamier than this to say it's greasy. And it's a sign of pitta kapha, heat and dampness, or heat and too much sweetness. Notice this tongue is long. You see how long this tongue is? All the other tongues we've seen have not been this long. This tongue is medium. Again, a little bit long, but not quite. Not long. A little bit longer, but not quite. A little bit longer. But this tongue here is quite long. You see that? One thing that makes limbs long and lanky is good circulation, right? We see in kapha people that they tend to be short and stocky and a tapering constitution. It's because they can't circulate the blood out easily, and so their limbs don't grow as long. Whereas vatas circulate very easily, and their limbs grow longer. So you have long and lean and short and stocky. That's very interesting. Now here we see some peeled patches. These are signs of deficiency and dryness in Chinese medicine. Ayurveda says they're signs of parasites. And I think of them as both, a little bit of degeneration, a little bit of dryness. We see there's some coating surrounding it. And there's not many cracks, so it's not that dry. So even though the TCM would say this is dryness, again, I think the Ayurveda assessment of parasites here is the more accurate one. This tongue has a healthy pink color. Not too hot, not too cold, right? This tongue is very unhealthy in that it has these patches on it. That's something I would take care of right away. But otherwise, from a color perspective, it's neither too anemic nor too fiery. Okay, this is greasy. And you might even say an old tofu coating. You see how that looks like car grease? The coating is firm, it's stiff, and it looks like it would come off in chunks. Think of this coating as cracked, dried mud. That there's dryness mixing with ama, right? That this coating has been sitting there for a little bit, that it actually kind of dried out. This dirty yellow color implies some chronic pitta ama, and the fieriness of the tongue confirms that. Look at all these red dots and the deep red color. You can see even the redness in the lips, that this person has a pitta imbalance, and we need to really cool down that internal inflammation. She's young, right? This is a youthful looking tongue. And so, this person can get away with it for a little bit, right? Because of the strength of their Agni and fire. But this will wither their body if left unhealed. Okay, now this tongue has no coating and really has no papillae either. It's kind of like a smooth tongue. That's a little bit of an issue, but if a tongue has no coating at all whatsoever, that I think of as a sign of deficiency. You see this sometimes with alcoholics. Now, this tongue doesn't quite look red enough for alcoholic tongue, but you see that a person who likes to drink wine and who's somewhat youthful, i.e. in their 20s, uh, will have no coating on their tongue because the alcohol ignites such a fire in their system that it burns off all substance and leaves them just a little depleted. So this person I would think of as deficient in blood plasma. That deficiency causing heat to flare up and burning off the coating. This tongue is a very fiery tongue. You see the deep redness here. This, this to me looks like the tongue of somebody who smokes too many cigarettes, or again, drinks too much, or something that ignites a real serious fire in the body. And you see that it has dried out the body, creating these cracks, and you see the teeth are very discolored. This is a person that I would want to bring back into balance before something bad happens to them. Okay? All right. Here we see a swollen tongue. That now the scallops are kind of towards the tip of the tongue, so it could be that this person is just pushing their tongue up against their teeth. That happens with a tense tongue. But the other signs that this person looks quite limp and not very good tone, and that the tongue looks very puffy, suggests that these scallops here, they're called, are really caused by the fact that the tongue is swollen and inflamed. It's not really fitting in their mouth anymore. So that's a sign of lack of fluid transport. Spleen deficiency in Chinese medicine, it would be called. But in Ayurveda, it would just be called blood stagnation or poor circulation, which leads to edematic swelling of the tongue. Okay, what we should see on the tongue is just some lumps in the back, maybe, and fine red dots at the tip. This is another smooth tongue. It's just an extreme condition that you would want to, really prevent. And you could see this person's struggling. I mean, you could see there's fluids that are dried around the mouth and some sores there. And this is a person who is struggling. The crack is not even in the center. Maybe there's some loss of muscle function that's causing asymmetry here. So this is a severe condition. This kind of tongue reflects severe deficiency in the tongue and degeneration of function. This is what I would think of as a sign of someone who's terminally ill or very elderly. Bright red spots, we talked about a few times. Notice the greasy coating. The bright red spots are showing that there's an acute heat here that could be an infection or a fever or about to get a fever. Okay, let's talk about cracks on the tongue. So normal should be no cracks. And that's typically the case in young people. So if I see a severe crack in a person who's 20 years old, that's alarming to me. If I see no cracks on a person who's 40 years old, that's amazing. So cracks imply deficiency of some kind. And if the tongue is soft, supple, and without cracks, it means adequate nourishment, that the blood plasma is well nourished. So cracks talk about the quality of fluid and the delivery of fluid and the drainage of fluid. So cracks themselves are a sign of dryness, a vata disorder, a sign of deficiency, that the tongue is inadequately moistened, that there's degeneration in the tissue. Right? The tissue is breaking up. It's like cracked mud, right? If you see, if it rains in the desert, there'll be some puddles of water, and then when they dry up, you get a cracked earth. That's what you should think of when you see this tongue, is cracked earth, like as if mud is cracking. So if we filled this tongue back up with fluid, the cracks would disappear, and you would see a tongue that looks more like that. This is a tongue that's full. This is a tongue that's drained of fluid. You see there's no puffiness there? Well, if we filled up the fluid right here and right here, this crack would close. Now, you can get cracks like this from day to day, right? Like on Tuesday, you could have a crack like this, and next Tuesday, you could not have that crack. Cracks are rated by degree, first, second, or third degree. First is small superficial cracks, like this. Some of these cracks, not the center one, but some of these ones are quite superficial, right? Whereas, this crack is quite deep. The more numerous the crack and the deeper the crack, the more severe. So one superficial crack, no big deal. Many superficial cracks, yeah, it's a little bit of a deal. Many deep cracks, that's a bigger problem. Cracks always imply injury to fluids. Now here you see coating in the crack, and that again suggests acute imbalanced dosha spreading in the blood, or also called a wind condition. Now in this case, because of the yellowness, it's also a phlegm fire, you would say in Chinese medicine. Again, pitta tends to be yellow, and pitta's heat, and this this bilirubin in the blood is a sign of inflammation somewhere, and maybe the liver. Now, this coating also looks gray and brown, so I'm going to guess that this is another case of constipation, that we have swelling in the tongue, so poor circulation. The tongue looks cold. There's not a lot of fire. Agni is low. And this gray, greasy, yellow coating says to me that there's inflammation in the colon. Okay, now some would say that the location of the crack corresponds to a vata disorder in a particular organ. So if you have a coating at the tip, they say that's the heart, or coating down the center, that's the spine, right? I always take that with a grain of salt. I don't put too much stock in the location. I tend to think of it more just in terms of hot, dry, cold, hot or cold, oily or dry, thick or thin fluids, heaviness or lightness, sharpness or dullness. I tend to think in those terms, not so much organs, but there's a whole science behind that. I won't go over it today. But in the course, we will go over that. All right. Here we see a lot of deep cracks on the tongue. And this is called a fissured tongue. This tongue that we saw before with the deep papillated parts. Can I find it? There we go. That's called a geographic tongue because it looks like a geography map. So a fissured tongue and a geographic tongue. Okay. This tongue lacks heat and also has very deep cracks and a slimy, thick coating on it. So to me, this is alarming tongue. That there's no heat and no moisture. That's someone asked earlier about tongue and age. Well, in the beginning of your life, you start with a lot of excess substance, right? Young children are very kapha in nature. As they get just a little bit older, their heat becomes more organized, and in their early teenage years, they're more pitta kapha. They have both heat and moisture, and that is the best, to have heat and moisture, right? Life flourishes in heat and moisture. Now, excess heat is pathological, so is excess moisture. But if you have enough heat, you won't have too much moisture. And if you have enough moisture, you won't have too much heat. So hot and moist is the best. And you start out with life moist, then you become hot and moist, and then you become hot and dry, and then you become cold and dry. And cold and dry is the worst. It's old age. And that is what you're seeing on this tongue. Okay, this is hot and dry, cold and dry. See the difference? All right, good. I think we've gone over some of these principles. We can go a little deeper in. I don't want to keep you too long. We're 9 minutes past the hour, but let's go over some things we haven't seen. A long V-like tongue with some blood stagnation on it here. But constitutionally, this is a person who's Vata Pitta. They have thin fluids, but adequate heat, making the tongue long and tapering like this. All right, this is a short tongue. The person can't even muster up enough energy to get it out. Gray coating, totally depressed in the root. So there's a sort of deflation of the tongue. If you think of the tongue as a balloon, if you deflate the balloon, it's going to look like that. Another V tongue. This tongue lacks color, but so the whole photo lacks color. So I think there's a lot of distortion here. A thin tongue. You see how this tongue is swollen and this tongue is very thin. Okay. Redness to the tip. This is a little too red on the tip. Doesn't look that bad, but this is a blue tongue showing lack of circulation and cyanosis to the tongue. Poor circulation. All right, good. Well, we could go over some more details and talk about some of these patterns, but I think that's enough for today. We'll leave some additional learning to the course. I want to thank you all for learning about tongue diagnosis and also tell you that since you attended this presentation, you can claim a $750 scholarship to the Digestive Health Coach course anytime in the next 3 days by registering in the next 3 days. Also, if you text me at my phone number, 828-785-8213, with any questions you have, I know that you may have some questions about the course before enrolling. You know, the commitment and the number of classes a week and all of that. I will give a course intro next week in the course. But if you want to take advantage of this $750 scholarship to study digestion, text me your questions or go on the site and register. And for the next 3 days, we will apply that. And yes, thank you for your interest in the tongue. Thank you for your interest in health. They say disease is contagious, but health is also contagious. Every time you do something for your health, you glow more and you look healthier. Well, other people want what you have, and they start to get healthier too. So you can heal the world by healing yourself, and by studying Ayurveda, which is the study and the art of life. That's what it means, and we will learn some of the essence and secrets of life as everybody thought about it for thousands of years. And so the study of Ayurveda is very natural. It's filled with common sense, and it's common sense that we need to reintroduce into our culture. And it's also one of the things I love about Ayurveda is that in its simplicity is also very profound. So that I can study Ayurveda for 20 years and feel like I learned just as much last year as I did in year 1 of my study. It's a very satisfying thing to study Ayurveda and watch it unfold in your life, over your life. It makes life happy and good to know the body. And so it's a wonderful thing. And I invite you all to take the next step and to go deeper with it. And I thank you again for taking the initiative today. You now know more than 90% of people about health just from hearing this one presentation. Go out, look at your tongue, look at your kid's tongue, look at your spouse's tongue, and start to see what different tongues look like in different constitutions. And maybe one day we will get to study together. You know, I know many people who delay studying Ayurveda and resent not studying Ayurveda. Nobody resents knowing Ayurveda. I have been in the Ayurveda profession for several decades now, and I have never met a person who regrets studying Ayurveda. I only meet people who regret not studying it, that they put it off year after year, hoping that something will change. But Ayurveda is the change. And when you study it, wonderful things happen. And so it is a fascinating and great thing to do with your life. I certainly don't regret it. I loved it when I started it. I love it now. And everyone I know who studied it feels that way about it. So thank you all very much for choosing to study the tongue, for choosing Ayurveda, and for choosing Joyful Belly. And I hope to see you in class, everyone. And now let me open the floor for questions. See if I have any tongues in my inbox. Oh, I do see that I got some tongue photos here. All right, let me look. Let's see if I can get these on the screen. Give me just a second here, okay? I'm going to shut my screen off and open up a document here and then share my screen again. Okay. Let me get this first tongue photo up. Okay. So here's the photo of the tongue. Remember what we said before, we're going to look out from the periphery to the center. So we see that the lips here, just a little bit pale, that there is a thin chin here. So we're going to say that this person has a predominantly Vata constitution, maybe with a little bit of Pitta mixed in. Could be Pitta Vata, you know, we'll see as we go. And now let's zoom in on the tongue just a little bit. Let me see if I can crop this image. And that way we can zoom in nicely. Beautiful hair. All right, and we see that the tongue coating is a little bit gray and a little bit yellow. So there's a little bit of strain on the liver, and there's a little bit of Vata ama. So this could point to some gas and bloating in the digestive tract, or some stagnation of the bowels, which we might want to clear. And then the strain on the liver that's causing is making the yellow on the tongue. So a mild laxative like Harataki might be good to clear this tongue. But also I want to see just a little bit more fire in this client's constitution, perhaps, you know, more healthy fire. So once we clear the ama and that yellow coating dies down, I would then want to invigorate the blood just a little bit. Maybe that could be something as simple as an herb like Bringaraj. Bringaraj being a hepatoprotective, in other words, liver protecting herb that reduces pitta, but at the same time builds blood and is known for creating a brightness in the body. So I think this client has a lot of brightness naturally, but a little bit of management could bring out some of the best of this client's constitution. You know, we see here that, again, just the color of the tongue shows heat is just a little off. And we could use some, a little bit of tuning. That's all. Otherwise, healthy. Okay, let's take a look at the next tongue. Okay, here's the next tongue. Let's let me, so we can see the whole photo. There's the whole photo here. And now let's zoom back out. So now let's compare the lighting in both photos. Both of these photos seem to have decent lighting. So I'm not seeing too much distortion on the basis of lighting in either photo. We could see here that this client has thicker skin, a little more substance to the body. So a little more kapha. But we're still seeing just a little bit of paleness in the tongue. Not bad. Not bad at all. The tongue has good engagement. It's a little bit asymmetrical. Why is the tongue not coming out directly straight, but veering to the right? So that points to some little aberration in the nervous system. I see some very mild scallops, but nothing too much to complain about. Overall, there's not much I would do with this tongue other than maybe relax the nervous system a little bit for this asymmetry. There's a little bit of excess coating here, which, could point to, I wouldn't even say that there's an excess of substance here. Maybe it would just be a little more bitters in the diet. Might be more than enough for this client. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Now we see this tongue has more dryness. There's substance, just like in both of these two tongues. We see that constitutionally, the tongue looks and appears as if it has the same amount of substance. But this tongue looks more dried out. So I would be looking at, how to build ojas in this client's body, meaning how to improve quality of tissue overall through a little bit of nourishment, perhaps. I would this hard to tell with the lighting in this photo, but to me, this tongue looks a little gray and not quite warm enough. I see the rosiness in the cheeks, though. So you see how I'm correlating, right? I'm looking here. I'm not seeing the heat, except for on the tip. But then in the cheeks, I do see a little bit of heat. And the lips look plenty of hot. So, it's not quite, it's not immediately obvious what direction to go with this tongue. We need maybe a little more information as to conditions. But because of the deep crack and the scallops on the tongue, I'm definitely, there's definitely a bit of deficiency somewhere, maybe a little bit of low Agni, and we would want to build that up a little bit. So yeah, we need to ask this client a few more questions. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I would clear the bowels with this client a little bit. More hydration. I think I'm gonna guess that this client, and this is just a total guess. I have nothing to back it up other than just the tongue, right? So, but I'm gonna just put out my clinical hypothesis that this client pees a lot, and that frequent urination is stressing out the kidneys a little bit, and drying out the body a little too excess. Why am I saying this? Because I'm seeing ama plus dryness, which to me means the ama is being flushed out through the kidneys. So for this client, I would probably tonify the kidneys, try to rehydrate them, and that might clear up the deficiency. I would give mild laxatives, and try to boost this client's digestive strength. And I think overall that would would help rebalance. Okay, but these are, again, guesses. These are not consultations. I'm just looking at, one part of the body. So you would need to do a full consultation before you could have any confidence in what I'm saying. Just want to say that because I don't want people to go out and do this and expect, some results when a full analysis has not yet been accomplished. Now I'm having a little bit of trouble here importing this next photo. Let me try one more time a different way. I'll save the image first. And then try to get it in. Oh yeah, that worked. Okay. Okay, so here's our next photo. Let me just zoom out a little bit so we can see. All right. So this client has only superficial cracks. The tongue is mildly swollen, but not too bad. And I see someone texting me the tongue. If you want me to take a look at it, email it to me at john@joyfulbelly.com. There's a little bit of depression at the root. Now, this is what I would call essence deficiency, meaning that the person has used up some of their vitality through, through their life. Maybe, could be anything from partying hard to working the late shift, too many years, or just some other strain on the body, right? That has ended up depleting vitality just a little bit. That's what you mean by essence deficiency. The tongue is a little bit pale too. So a blood builder and a rasayana and what I would call maybe a chi tonic. You could even say something like ginseng, which was, one of the ultimate chi tonics. Something that would both build substance, an anabolic herb that is also revitalizing. So let's see, what could we do? Even Chyawanprash would be an Ayurvedic tonic that might help this client. Yeah, Chyawanprash. Okay. Some shadows on this tongue makes it a little bit more difficult to analyze, but there's the whole picture on the screen. I think there's a key here that if I hit it, it'll make the whole screen. There we go. We get a little more screen space that way. Okay, so here we go. So overall, this is a pretty good tongue, right? The little discoloration on the tongue, but I'm not seeing a strong coating. I'm not seeing strong cracks on the tongue. The tongue has decent engagement. So overall, I mean, I'm just looking at the skin here. Looks oily skin. So there's just a little bit of coloring is off, but otherwise a good, strong, healthy constitution. And it's wonderful to see that. And yeah, a little bit of brightness. Turmeric can sometimes bring brightness. There's a little bit of grayness. So we might try a laxative plus something to brighten up the body. So turmeric, ginger, and a little bit of triphala tea. Triphala tea might just provide that bowel cleansing that would be helpful and the right amount of revitalization. Okay. You see, when you look at all these tongues one after the other, you really, it would be hard to do this if we just saw one tongue to become, it's this comparison that really starts to give you all these insights. You see all these tongues next to each other. Now look, you see here, this is a fiery tongue. It's a long tongue I said before that long tongues are a sign of heat and low viscosity fluids. We see also the grayness that's in the tongue coating crack. So this situation, there's a little bit of fire here. We see the redness in the nose and in the cheeks. That this fieriness could come from a little bit of alcohol. It could also come from other inflammatory processes somewhere in the body. That the coating is in the crack shows me that there's heat in addition to toxicity, and a little bit of sweetness in the blood. So, I mean, I'll get some coating in my tongue if I am coming down with a fever or something like that, or something's a little off. So with this client, I would clear heat with bitter herbs like yarrow, dandelion, or neem. And I would probably give a mild laxative to clear out some of that ama. And I would also probably give bright red or blue berries, like blueberries or raspberries or something like that, to act as antioxidants in the body. Maybe even amalaki. Yeah, let's go with amalaki. Amalaki with a little bit of neem, I think would be a great mix for this client with some laxatives, triphala. Okay. All right. I see 3 more tongues. All right. This will be my last tongue for today. Although this is fun. And I'm real glad that you all were so brave in sending your tongues. Here we go. I mean, the lighting in this tongue makes it hard to see. It just looks like a golden tongue. I mean, really, the first thing that comes to my mind is Olympic tongue, right? Not that that's a clinical analysis, but just there's a sort of, it just looks like a gold color because of the reflection of the light. But otherwise, I see only superficial cracks only. Skin looks healthy, teeth look healthy, and the tongue has good engagement. I don't have much to say with this tongue. There's a little bit of tension in the nervous system causing the person to maybe suck on the tongue or push it up against their teeth. This is not a swollen tongue. And but overall, a healthy person. Thank you all for sending your tongues. Let me look at some questions that you have here. Cynthia echoes what I said. She found Ayurveda 30 years ago, and it has been a fascinating journey. Yes, it is. It really is. And Eleonora says, fascinating. Thank you. I'm actually a student who signed up to the course, which started October 8th. Great. So look forward, Eleonora, to having you in class. That's very exciting. Let's see what other questions we have here. Is Hing the same as Chyawanprash? No, Hing Vastak Chorna, which is an herb formula made with Hing that's like a little more balanced, and then Chyawanprash, there's a few different spellings of that, are all distinct. Hing is hot and aromatic. Hing Vastak includes a little more pungency and salt. And Chyawanprash is sweet, made primarily of grapes and sesame oil mixed in with a bunch of tonic herbs. All right. Good. I think I got most of the questions. Let's see if there was some other stuff that I didn't answer, because I did ask in the beginning if you had any questions. I think I talked about all of that. So yeah, a chronic sore throat will definitely cause changes in the tongue. Just the same bacteria that's sort of attacking the back of the throat also attack the tongue. So that may be where a smooth patch is coming from. It may literally be the same pathology as the sore throat. Let's see if I have any other questions. Someone asked about tongue fungus. Well, coating is in a way a fungus. I mean, it's bacteria and fungi. But if you have a fungus, that could point to dampness in the body. So my first, without knowing anything more about this client, I would say to reduce cough in the blood. Yeah. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bless you all. And I hope that we have an opportunity someday to study together. Reach out with any questions that you have. And if you're planning on registering, go ahead, register in the next 3 days and get a discount for doing so. Might as well, right? And hopefully we will see you soon. If you have any other questions, I'll stay on. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your night.